All right. Welcome back to another episode of The Close-Up, a part of the Orlando Magic HQ Network. My name's Stephen Cameron, and today we have an awesome guest today. We have Keith Smith of Spot Track and the Front Office Show. He is awesome. He's the guy I bring on every year right before the trade deadline and during the offseason, talk about the Magic's trade assets, what the draft picks look like, what the contract situations look like, what some frameworks of trades could look like, and just kind of where their position is in the league. And we have an awesome conversation about all that. We literally talk about all that. What is their situation, ranking, and kind of in the rest of the league, kind of what are their movable contracts, what their cap sheet looks like. It's really good, and we even have some fun. We talk about potential trades with Colin Sexton and Cam Johnson and Cam Thomas and a few other people, Anthony Simons. It's a lot of fun. Keith is great, and I think you're all going to really, really enjoy the conversation. We recorded this Sunday, January 19th, just before the Magic tip-off for the Denver Nuggets, so we don't really talk much about the actual Magic basketball that's been played. If you want that, make sure you tune into our other shows. Tune into the Orlando Magic HQ show on Fridays. You can even jump into the post-game spaces on Twitter X. You can even talk, or you can even read our articles if you want, but that is not this show. I'll talk more about the Magic and their current play next week on my episode. This one is purely a trade deadline preview, and I think it's really, really fun. I think you all are really going to enjoy it. So before we get to that conversation, we got to do our plug, our supporters, our sponsors. So first off, BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to NHL and UFC, BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. It's a great betting app. Check it out. Great platform, great website. Their app is easy to use too. Magic fans, listen up. Orlando Magic Radio Network pregame and postgame host Brandon Kravitz is live daily on 96.9 The Game with In the Zone starting at 3:30 p.m. And on Magic Game Days, he stretches that show an extra 30 minutes all the way to 6:30, the final 30 minutes being completely Magic focused. Want bonus content? Check out his Zone Heads podcast for weekly on-demand episodes. Brandon Kravitz is just great. Check him out. He does a great job covering all of Orlando Magic sports, and he's just an awesome partner to us over at Orlando Magic HQ. Highly recommend you check him out. Also, we have an awesome Patreon program going on. Make sure you check it out. The link's in the description. A couple different tiers you can get in. Financially helping us gives us opportunities to financially kick back to you with giveaways and being able to do more content and helping our people do what they need to do. So we'd appreciate it if you go over to our Patreon page and check that out. Without further ado, let's get to this conversation with Keith Smith. Like I said, everyone, we got Keith Smith of Spot Track and the Front Office Show. You guys have heard him on this show many a times over the years. He is the guy I go to almost every deadline and every offseason to just kind of figure out the important aspects of the Orlando Magic and their assets and their cap and all the other stuff. Keith, great to have you on the show. How's it going? Thanks for joining.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you. Yeah, it's going really well. It's been it's a hectic time at this time of year, but everything is going really, really well. And I'm looking forward to what I hope will be an exciting trade deadline, but we'll see.
It should be, I think, fairly fun because we've already seen a few things happen, which, I mean, I've heard this from your shows. Isn't it like less than 5% of the trades happen before like the deadline day or something like that?
Yeah, it's a very low amount. Well, we get to deadline week and things really pick up there, but we've already had 4 trades, I think, already, which is pretty remarkable. We don't normally have that many. There have been no blockbusters, but like last year, we had a couple blockbusters right around this time with,
Right.
it was a couple weeks ago, if we go back, or year plus a couple weeks ago, for OG Anunoby, but Pascal Siakam's trade came in around now, a couple weeks out from the deadline. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if something big happens here in the next few days, but things will really pick up deadline week and then deadline day, especially.
Sure. And for fans listening, we're recording this Sunday afternoon on January 19th. You'll hear this on Tuesday, the 21st. So if something happens between now and then, that's why we didn't talk about it. So, all right, let's get into it a little bit. Specifically, we're here to talk about the Magic. They are in an interesting place this year. To me, when I look at this team, it's like the first real team that I feel like the front office could justifiably go out and be like buyers and aggressive, but I think there's reasons why they may not be that. But like, when people discuss this Magic front office, they're like, oh, they've never been aggressive in past deadlines. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But why, what reasons did they have to be aggressive and go improve a team during a tanking season, or, kind of like they knew the ceiling that a big trade wouldn't really change much. So this is kind of like this format of this team, this era is kind of starting to move into the buying aspect of things. At least that's my perspective. So when you look at this Magic roster and just the assets the front office have with their pick situation and all that, the way they've set up their contracts, when you look at how they've kind of set themselves up compared to how other teams have in the league have set themselves up, just like where do you see them in the power rankings of trade flexibility and assets compared to the rest of the league?
Yeah, they're in a good spot. They're not in like an overwhelmingly great spot. Like they're not Oklahoma City, which no one really is. They're not Brooklyn. Houston has extra picks. Utah is sitting on a bunch of extra picks. Those teams are kind of controlling the draft for the next several years because they have most, if not all, of their own picks, plus several other picks from other teams. The Thunder are still reaping the benefits from when they did their teardown. And then Brooklyn and Utah are in full-scale rebuilds. And then Houston is kind of coming on the back end of having rebuilt over the last couple of seasons. So when you look at the Magic, they've got all of their own first-round picks. They've got an extra pick coming from the Nuggets. That Nuggets pick probably going to come this year, barring some complete disaster in Denver that we don't think will happen.
Top 5 protected, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So you'd need them to fall out and then have no luck in the lottery, and those things are probably not going to be a thing that happens. So I think what we can expect is pick in the 20s there. The Magic will have their own pick, and then they've got all their own future first and then second rounders. They're fairly well flushed with a couple of seconds here because they've got some, but they're a little further out. But that's fine. They're not in a spot where you really need all that many seconds. So mostly second rounders become capital if you're buying guys that are very low contract prices, or teams are just looking to shed those salaries or use them to, hey, can you take a smaller contract on from us? The Magic aren't in position to do really that at all. So it's mostly about their first round capital. So I'd say they're in good shape because they at least have all of their own first, and they do have that extra Denver pick, which is, while not a great pick, it's still a first round pick in what should be a pretty loaded draft this year.
Don't they also have a pick swap with Phoenix, I think in 2026? And I feel like that's got some stipulations around it. Like maybe there's another team that if it lands in a certain place, another team gets it. Can you tell me a little bit more about that pick and what in that just whole situation? So I remember it like being, oh, this could be cool because Phoenix is kind of a mess and probably will be a mess, but also it didn't seem like super straightforward last time I really like dove down the details of it.
Yeah, it's really not at all. It's not at all like simple to understand. It is the more favorable of Orlando and less favorable of Phoenix and Washington, but there's also a Memphis condition in there as well if Washington doesn't land 1 through 8. So it's kind of think of it as it's probably going to be a decent pick, but probably not anything that, because you're not ever going to get the Washington portion. Sure. So you're talking it's going to be Phoenix or Memphis who are going to be probably right around where Orlando is in the standings
Yeah.
next season. So I don't put too much into that one because it's got so many conditions on it. It is without a doubt the most complicated first round pick that's out there because you have these four teams and conditions if Washington is 1 through 8, and if Washington can make a pick this year, which they won't, but there's all this stuff that's added into it. But it's probably not going to be all that juicy of a pick.
Now, if Phoenix were to like blow it up this summer and trade Kevin Durant, and the only player left is maybe Devin Booker, and they're like a play-in team or something like that, would that help it? Could it be a late lottery type pick, or is there just so many protections not likely?
Yeah, probably not likely. I mean, it could be, but then again, you got to, where is Memphis at? Where's Orlando's record at?
Yeah.
Where's Washington's record at? So that's where it gets, that one gets super confusing because of all of the conditions, that are attached to it. Where again, it's four teams, and one of those teams has multiple conditions on them based with Washington, based on where they are. And how the Magic got that was they basically Phoenix was Horcruxing, to use a Harry Potter term. They were Horcruxing their swap rights in trades to be able to acquire second round picks. And the Magic said, "Yeah, you want a couple seconds? Sure. We'll throw you a couple seconds, but throw us a pick that maybe it'll become something, maybe it won't."
Sure.
And that's kind of how that all came together.
Makes sense. I just finished the first Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone a couple days ago, so like I love the reference. Keep them coming. All right, so this kind of blended into the second question I had for you, where it was, what important information do Magic fans need to know about specific players and stuff like that on the Magic roster? And the first thing that comes to my mind is Wendell Carter Jr. is not trade eligible for this trade deadline. But is there anything else that Magic fans need to kind of keep in mind as they are processing, playing on the world's best trade machine at Spot Rack and things like that? What do Magic fans need to know about this year and kind of the assets and contracts they have?
Yeah, I'm glad you called out Wendell Carter because I keep getting people saying, "Why is Wendell Carter not trade eligible? He only makes X amount of." It's because of the extension he signed. That's why when he signed that extension, it took him beyond the extended trade limits, which is what triggers a 6-month. That's why he's not trade eligible.
Got it.
I'm at the trade deadline. Beyond that, the Magic don't have any significant trade restrictions. Actually, they have none. Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner both have poison pill restrictions. But who cares? They're not getting traded anyway, so it doesn't really matter. With whatever restrictions they have on them, they're not going to get moved in a deal. The Magic are also very fortunate. They're not a big team that hands out bonuses in contracts. So what's happening? So with a guy like Cam Johnson, for example, makes, I believe it's 22.5 million, 23.5 million right now is his actual cap hit. But he is at 27 million. He's 22.5 million cap hit, and he's at 27 million because of bonuses towards the apron. So when teams are like, "Yeah, we want to get Cam Johnson," if you're living near the apron, it's going to be really hard to bring in because that's an extra 4.5 million that you're probably not really planning for to have on your books that would flow in there. So that's something you have to keep a real concern on. For the Magic, they don't have anything like that. So anybody they want to move, they can move. That is, becomes very easy in that respect because you're not having to work around anything. And then the last thing I would say that is really important, they don't have any cap space, but the Magic have two things going for them. First is they still have their full room exception, which is just under $8 million, $7.983 million. That can now be used as a trade exception. So if they wanted to acquire somebody who makes $7 million, they could just do it. They don't necessarily have to send the matching salary out. And part of the reason they don't need to send the matching salary out is they're about 20.5 million under the luxury tax. So they have all kinds of clearance under the luxury tax to do anything. It's almost impossible for them to make a deal that's going to take on so much money that they would even be threatening to go into the luxury tax. And that's important because as well as they have played, and especially weathering the storm of injuries, been still quite frankly in it, but getting through all of that, they don't think there's any world where anybody's looking at it and saying, "Yeah, we're close enough to go all in and pay the tax this year," because they're just, that's not quite the level they're at yet. but they can't. It's almost impossible to do that anyway, and that's good because that can allow them some flexibility. Now, one thing to keep an eye on: they're starting to get expensive starting next year. Like next year, as things start out, they're probably gonna be around the luxury tax line. Then that's because Suggs contract kicks in, Franz Wagner contract kicks in. Those two guys make 16 million this year. They combine to make nearly 74 million next season.
Wow.
So you're in a spot where when those contracts jump way up, even though Jonathan Isaac's contract goes down, you're still in a place where that's a big number on your books. And that's, clearly they planned for that as they built everything out long term. But that's just something they're going to have to be conscious of. So I would not necessarily lock into, hey, we're going to trade for this guy who makes big money right now, because I don't know that they want to be in a position to have Wagner and Suggs, and then the year after next, Banchero all on the roster making near max money, and then one other guy who makes near max money. That's when you start to get in trouble, with apron restrictions.
I believe I saw it on the website that the Magic are projected to have like a top 3 or top 5 salary cap sheet next year. Is that correct? I know it's a lot, as you mentioned, but I feel like it was like up there.
It's
super. Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's up there, but it's there's a lot of variability in that right now.
Sure.
So when we look at it today, we're putting in 11 million for Mo Wagner, 7.5 million for Gary Harris, 3.5 million for Corey Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those guys won't be there, and if
That's
they
true.
are, they won't be there at those numbers.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
They'll be there for far less money than that, and more likely probably not there at all for a couple of those guys, because you got to remember most everybody else. Well, basically everybody else is signed to a guaranteed contract, and you're going to be adding 2 more draft picks.
Yeah.
So a couple people got to go just roster wise with this, and that's assuming there's no other trades or whatever. So we're going to see kind of how that comes together. But yeah, I mean, they're up there right now. My guess is they'll do what they need to do to get under the tax line. And that just gives them freedom of movement as far as how they can make it work with trades and the like and all that stuff. So I think that's where we'll probably see them go. So it's not one of those things where I'm like, well, this is like Boston, who's so far over the apron in tax line they can't even see it anymore. Like, they're not in that situation at all.
Do you think there's a possibility where they're operating at this deadline and thinking maybe let's prepare a little bit for the future and like shed a contract that they might not want long term? Or do you think like that's not really the goal? We're not worried about next year's salary cap sheet. We'll worry about that in the summer.
Yeah, I think that's more of a let's worry about that later situation, because if you look at it, who would be the contracts you don't really want? Well, maybe Cole Anthony.
Yeah.
That's a nice piece of tradable salary, whether you use him in a deal right now to get somebody in the next couple of weeks before the deadline, or if you put him in a deal next summer, that's still a nice piece of tradable salaries. So you want to be careful. They've done a really nice job managing the cap sheet. They don't have a single bad contract on the books, and that's really important. So I don't know that I'd be in the position of, hey, let's get out of Cole Anthony's contract just because that'll really help us next summer, especially when you need Cole Anthony right now because of all the injuries. So I think they have to really be balancing, because how do you then go tell Paulo and Franz and other guys, hey, actually, we got to manage next season's cap sheet, so we're going to punt a little bit on this season with our depth. That's just not going to go over well with a young team that has really been scrapping and fighting, because it's almost insulting, right? You're telling them, hey, we appreciate how much you fought and battled this year, but actually doesn't really matter to us. Now, if you're the Brooklyn Nets and they were fighting and battling, yeah, you get it, because they're in a full-scale rebuild. The Magic are not. They're trying to be a playoff team. I think it's more likely they use Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, maybe even Mo Wagner. We can talk about that if you want, in trades where it is, hey, let's go get somebody who can help right now, and then we'll figure out the long-term situation. The Magic have never been a let's pay, go crazy and pay tons in the tax, but they've also, when they've been really good, now it was under former owner who has since passed away. We don't really know what will happen when they're faced with it now, but under the the DeVos family, they have paid the tax before, and they've all right, we're good. We'll pay the tax to really go out there and compete for a title. And I think they're probably, my guess is, still in that boat. But that's where Jeff Weltman is going to be a good steward of, if we're not ready yet, we're going to be really cautious, because I want, when I think we are ready, I don't need them coming back and like, hey, remember when we paid the tax and
Yeah,
we were the sixth seed? Like, that's where that kind of becomes that balancing act.
that makes sense. I feel like, this team, if they were healthier the entire season, maybe they'd operate this deadline a little bit differently. But like, what's kind of your gut feeling about how the Magic are going into this deadline and what they may be trying to accomplish and how aggressive they may want to do something to truly improve the team? Or, do you think it's like a marginal move? Like, just kind of what's your gut feeling? I have my thoughts, but I'll let you speak first.
Yeah, I'll start with saying the Magic are pretty good about speaking in generalities, where they don't leak a lot of stuff. They're generally pretty quiet, especially compared to some other teams. But you can get them to kind of talk theories a little bit when you get there, because that's all like, well, yeah, in theory, blah blah blah. And I think what the hope would have been is, if it was like 2 weeks late earlier in the season, and Franz was on the cusp of a return, which sounds like he'll be back within a week or so, by all accounts. We'll see what happens with Jalen Suggs. But it was like, man, if we had a month to the trade deadline, we could really see, all right, can we get back on track? Can we really start playing better? And then go out and really feel good about doing this. As it stands, we're only going to be probably a week to week and a half away from the trade deadline. And that's probably not going to be enough time to really tell you this is what it is. And it's funny, because I had someone say to me just yesterday, yeah, but don't they know what the team is from earlier in the season when they were healthy? And I was like, that was like 4 games. Like,
Wasn't much.
you don't, because Paulo went down, and then Franz went down, and then Paulo came back, and Suggs went out because now Batadze is out. Like it's just, they haven't seen what it looks like, at least with Banchero, Wagner, and Suggs all together. Like that's where it's like, man, like we just don't know. So that's a long way around answering your question to say, I think they'll be opportunistic if the right deal is there to go get somebody who can help the team beyond just, let's make a playoff push this year. It's got to be somebody who fits in. Hey, this guy really makes sense for the next 2-3 years with
Sure.
this core group, because he can fit in, he can elevate our group or whatever it is. Then I think you may see them do something like that.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I also feel like this front office doesn't give me the characteristics that they're gonna go send out a bunch of draft capital in the middle of a season. It just doesn't,
Yes.
I just don't get that's what they're gonna do. Granted, the right player comes up, could be anything.
Sure.
Before I
If like
sorry, go
Giannis
ahead.
decides tomorrow morning, I want to be traded, and the only place I want to go is Orlando, all of a
Different
sudden it is,
conversation.
here's 5 draft picks. Thank you.
Yes.
And draft swaps and everything else we can do, because we would love to have Giannis, of course, right? And those are the things that are different. That's why I always tell people there's very, very, very few times to use the word never in the NBA, because who knows what will happen, right? If you told people 2 years ago the Jimmy Butler Heat situation was going to fall apart, you might have got laughed at a little bit, because it was like, oh, they're like a match made in heaven, like, with all the Heat culture and all the
Sure.
Jimmy Butler of it all and all that. And look where we are today, right? It's
Yeah.
all kind of gone sideways. So I tend to think it's, but in general, I agree with you. And they're certainly not going to start throwing around draft picks for guys who are, they're marginal upgrades. They'll play 15 minutes off the bench.
Right.
Because they're, one, they're not that close to winning a title. And two, that's just not how they operate.
That makes sense. You earlier mentioned Mo Wagner and said we could circle back to that. What are your thoughts around that? Because I have some part of me thinks they won't move him just because of his relationship with his brother, but I'm also like, he's not going to play for at least a season or longer. Maybe I just don't know. What were your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so my thought with Mo Wagner is $11 million. It's essentially an expiring contract, because the Magic or any team that acquires him, it's a team option for next year, knowing he's either going to be maybe back towards Christmas-ish. Generally, ACL tears are about a year, a long return time, so probably around that time. depending on where he was to go to, it's very likely that team would say, "And we're going to decline it." They'd be acquiring Mo Wagner's contract as much as Mo Wagner. I
Sure.
mean, very much so for the rest of this year because Mo Wagner can't play.
Might
on
just
the
tell him
rest
to
of
stay
the
in
season.
Orlando.
And that's it. And they may just do that. Now, what's interesting is, right, if the Magic are, well, we would love to bring him back because we'll bring him back, let him finish out his rehab, and we'll welcome him back into the rotation around Christmas time. Well, people start, well, isn't there a year-long restriction on re-signing a guy you trade away and all that? Not if their contract expires. And if a team option is declined, contract expires, he's a free agent. He could sign with whoever he wanted to.
Makes
At
sense.
that point, Magic included. So I always go back to Ricky Rubio a few years ago. Got injured, got traded in a trade between the Cavs and the Pacers. When everybody knew he's not going to play, then he turned right around and re-signed with the team that traded him because his contract expired. And that is, I don't like as much as I'm Mr. Transaction Robot numbers guy. I don't think of these guys as just contract numbers.
Sure.
But at some point, when a player is out for injury and it doesn't really impact the long term on what's possible, you do start to think about, all right, what could we do with that salary slot? And that's where I think for the Magic, that's almost 11 million in free tradable salary because he's not going to be a part of the team the rest of the year. And it's not in a situation again where if the Magic trade him, they can't get him back. Because that would be different. If it was like,
Sure.
well, we're trading him and then we can't reacquire him, they definitely could. Now, where that could get a little messy is if a team acquires him and then waives him. But that's, we'll see how that all comes together. I don't know that that's exactly how it'll go, but we'll see. And it would really depend on, who are you trading them to and what are their goals, the rest of the team. But there's quite a few tanking teams that would be very happy to say, right to the inactive list with you because it doesn't really matter for us anyway if you play or not.
And then create open space on their cap sheets next year by shedding 11 million and declining the team option, which makes a lot of sense. He's an interesting player because there's part of me that is like, yep, go do that. Then there's part of me like, what would Franz feel if they did that? Unless it was super clear, we are going to bring you back. You are part of this thing. Lots of back end handshakes and wink winks kind of going on.
Exactly. And let's all be grown-ups and adults. Those things happen all the time. That's
totally.
Before anybody starts screaming, isn't that tampering?
Like, it absolutely is, but it's also how the NBA operates.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, and trust me, all 30 teams do it. The only time teams get super angry about tampering when it's a guy who's under a long-term contract and it's like, hey, we're going to kill your prospective trade value because we're going to make it clear we're going to trade for you and that's the only place you're going to go. And
totally,
that's when it gets out of control. But other than that, nobody openly cares, and the league doesn't really care unless you get super blatant about it and start throwing it in their faces.
And talking about it publicly and stuff like that. All right. We're wrapping up, but I have a couple of names that have been hot on the Magic fan base timeline and some of the group conversations I'm in. And I just want to see, I think you and I both agree it would have to be the very right person with the right type of contract that is a longer term fit, not just like a Band-Aid for this season and then they have to fix it again like in the off season or even later. They're only going to trade for this person if they think they fit the mold of the roster going forward. Got a few names, and maybe you don't even agree with them fitting with this team, but these are the names that Magic people are talking about. First one, and Magic fans get scared with this one because of the GM that runs the team, Colin Sexton. A lot of people like the idea of Colin Sexton, kind of a Cole Anthony upgrade in the second unit, can shoot the ball from three really well. He's shooting 40% from three on like 4.8 attempts per game, which is really nice. Not a great defender, but at least he tries. Even if his efforts are not amazing in my perspective, he at least puts energy out there. And, we all, I think, expect Utah to be sellers at this deadline as they are chasing the white flag. What would a framework have to be? And do Magic fans really need to be scared of Danny Ainge when it comes to a player in this level of category? Because I think we all agree he's gotten some crazy deals for his superstars that he's traded. But this is Colin Sexton. This isn't Rudy Gobert or any of the other players. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts around Colin Sexton.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the conversation starts with, you guys open to moving Franz Wagner, right? Because like that's just what Danny Ainge does. But
Sure.
very quickly it'll be, hey, can we be serious here? It shouldn't be terrifying because you're gonna have to pay to get him. You're probably gonna have to give up a first round pick, because my guess is they will have those kind of offers. Or if you're the Jazz, let's face it, they're doing pretty good losing games with him. So why they don't? I don't know that they feel we must trade him
Sure.
right now. I don't know that they're in a spot with that. That's kind of the sneaky thing about some of these tanking teams right now. Some of them are, hey, we're losing with the guy pretty well. And if we could, and I think Utah's hope is, let's try to turn this very quickly.
Yeah.
And if we can flip this to next year, we're trying to make a playoff run, then it becomes, wouldn't we like to have Colin Sexton as part of this? And that's where you're going to have to give up something real to get him. Anybody who's thinking matching salary in a couple seconds, that's not going to be enough. You have to give up first round picks. Now, the matching salary for the Magic, super easy. And I'm going to I'll say there's any player that makes, let's say, 18 million to 20 plus million. There's two paths. It's either Cole Anthony and Gary Harris, or it's Mo Wagner and Gary Harris. Either way, get you there. You can get there with other ways, but they're going to be guys the Magic probably don't want to give up, like
Sure.
Black and things like that. So just keep that in mind. It's Wagner and Harris if the team wants expirings, or it's going to be Anthony and Harris if they want a guy who can play a little bit more and do a little bit more for them to help. So you could get there pretty easy, but you'd have to pay a real price to get Colin Sexton.
Would it have to be like on the first round pick? Would it have to be like, some unprotected pick, or do you think there could be?
I think so.
This is getting really in the weeds, but like, could you do like a lottery protected or a fake first rounder, or do you think
it's not going to be a fake first rounder? There's no way they won't, because that's the same as a couple
seconds. Yeah,
point, right?
That's fair.
So yeah, I mean, you might be able to get away with, hey, can we top 10 protect this just in case everything goes sideways for us or something like that. And the other thing with Utah is Utah might be like, we don't really want your pick this year or next year. They may want to pick a little further down the line,
29 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because let's face it, the Magic should be a playoff team the next few years at least. They're probably still going to be a playoff team through the draft horizon, which is 7 years out. But I think what you have to be that's where you can't get too precious with your own picks, because what did we just talk about too? Magic already have a full roster. So at some point it becomes, throwing a pick or two in's not the worst idea, because then what you're doing is you're able to do that in. You'll fill out your roster with veteran minimum signings and the guy you get. So that's where I would not be too concerned about giving up a real first, but it's like one real first.
Yeah.
It's like, if I'm Orlando, Colin Sexton's not the guy I'm throwing multiple first round picks in for.
Do you think, this is kind of like a quick sidebar, but we can just barely touch on it. Do you think the way the new CBA works, teams are going to be a little bit more hesitant to give up first round picks?
I think they're going to be more hesitant to do the Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, here's 4 picks and 3 swaps type things, because I think they're going to look at Phoenix right now. We already talked about why the Magic are even involved in a pick with the Suns, is because the Suns had to get super creative to create any way to trade stuff. I think that's what you're going to see. But I think if it is give up a pick to go get a guy who really feels a targeted need, should be a good fit with everything you do, I think teams will still do that and operate the way they always have.
That makes sense.
Now you might have Boston might feel a little bit differently, where it is, we're pretty well locked into this core group of guys for the next few years. If we're going to ride this out, we really can't be trading picks, because we need those picks to replenish the back end of our roster, try to get in cheaper, cost-controlled talent for the next several years. That might be slightly different, but even there, they've proven to be very aggressive if they think the right player is out there, that they'll throw a pick in a deal.
That makes sense. Cool. All right, 2 more names. I'll just lay them both out at the same time. Anthony Simons with the Trailblazers and Cam Thomas with the Nets. Those are names that are popular right now with Magic fans. I understand why, this team is one of the worst offensive teams in the league right now. Granted, there's a lot of context here. They haven't been healthy. They've lost so many of their top players, and their shooting is awful. And, these guys are both fairly good shooters. So what are your thoughts around those two, and like what kind of framework are we talking about with these players to acquire them? One first round, two first round, like what you thinking here?
Yeah, I think Simons comes a little cheaper just because I think Portland's probably hitting a point based off of everybody I've talked to there where it's like we've kind of now been here, done that with Anthony Simons. He's already on his second contract with them. I think there's a point where the Blazers may say, all right, we really got to move forward with Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp as our backcourt. And that's going to be it because that's our guys, along with Donovan Clingan and then whoever else they may acquire over the next couple of years as they rebuild. So I think you're probably talking that one. You might be able to get away with a little bit more of one of those. Hey, can we lottery protect that pick just in case and that kind of thing? Because again, I think Portland would be a little happier to get off the contract.
Sure.
In that one, Cam Thomas is in a weird spot. Super small contract because he was a late first rounder. Anybody can trade for him, but there's two kind of contingencies with him. One, the Nets have no real reason to just give him up because he's still young enough that
I said Cam Thomas. I'm sorry. I meant Cam Johnson.
Cam Johnson.
I
Okay.
meant Cam Johnson. I totally apologize.
Sure. No, that's okay. I mean, two guys with similar names on the
Sure.
same team.
I
So yeah.
confuse
And
it all the
honestly,
time.
I
It's my
mean,
daily
both of them
mess-up.
are fair question.
Sure.
Like, to be honest, I'll just finish my Cam Thomas thought.
Okay.
The one thing with Cam Thomas is it's probably because a lot of teams are, hey, what it'll take to get Cam Thomas? And they're being told, you're going to have to come with a real offer. Like,
Sure.
probably that's more of a first and a young player type of offer because the matching salary component doesn't really need to be there because he makes so little. Now, Cam Johnson's really interesting. And I think he's somebody who could make a lot of sense for the Magic. He's on a pretty good contract moving forward for what he is. Really good shooter, can get his own shot, and very, very crucially, can play off the ball too. And that's the thing that I think when people start just, I always tell people just because it works in our trade machine on Spot Track doesn't make it a good trade, right? Like think about both sides. When I used to be a moderator over at Real GM on their message boards, the rules were you had to put in, if you on the trade board, you put in a fake trade idea, you had to put in why both sides would do the trade.
Makes sense.
Because people just start throwing, I mean, you see it all the time, but all kinds of guys at the Magic, oh, they should go get this guy. They should go get that guy. And some of them, I'm like, that dude's like super high usage and he's going to have the ball all the time. And then what, Paulo and Franz are just go stand in the corner guys? Not going to happen, right? So you need somebody who can really fit within the ecosystem. So I think what you can get with Cam Johnson is pretty versatile guy, can play really the 2, the 3, or the 4, depending on your lineup constructions. That fits with Paulo and Franz really nicely. Like I said, can play on ball, can play off ball, and he can really shoot. The team has to get more shooting. Like it is. We've hit a point, and some of it's injury related, but this is also now like a decade-long problem.
It's bad.
They can't shoot. Like they cannot shoot, and this year it's worse than it's ever been.
And they brought in shooter. They brought in they brought in KCP, who's having his worst year ever.
Yeah, and that's just like
in the water in Orlando.
Yeah, it might be. That might just be like the bummer of all bummers that KCP can't knock down shots. But you got to get more shooting. That's why I think Cam Johnson fits. Again, you could get there super easy. We talked about how he's got that weird contract because of his bonuses. But the Magic being so far under the tax and aprons, they're fine. They just need to match the actual salary number because they don't have any concern. So then it becomes Anthony and Harris or Wagner and Harris, or if they wanted to expand the deal out, you could, throw somebody else in there too and, really kind of figure that out. But I like him as a thought for the Magic simply because I think he's a guy who can really fit long-term as the team grows. Yes, throwing another 20 plus million on the books could cause some issues, but as we talked about before, you solve that next summer and you figure that out by, whatever the next trade you make is or whatever it is. And you sort through that. But he's a guy I would think about, like if you were telling me matching salary plus a first, an Orlando first plus the Denver first, done. Like I would do that without much thought process. Now the Nets already have, I think it's 4 first rounders in this upcoming draft. So they may say, hey, the Orlando first, we need to put that out a couple years.
Sure.
Nobody wants like 6 or 7 first round picks on one thing. If no other reason other than gosh, that team would be really rough.
Yeah.
It's if they all hit, you can't pay them all because they're all come due at the exact same
Got to
time.
space it out a little bit.
Exactly. So they'll want to, spread that out a little bit. But I would do that. If it was something like that, you might even be able to talk me into if they were like, hey, instead of Gary Harris, can we do Anthony Black? And if I'm Orlando, then it becomes, let's really sit down and have the conversation of, is Anthony Black ever going to be a starting level player for us in our current team construction? And if he's not, you need to consider doing something like that. Because again,
Sure.
Cam Johnson he's already a better player than Anthony Black. And I love Anthony Black. He might be my favorite player on the team. And I love what he could be. That's all what he could be.
It's in theory right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you got to really have that conversation. And this is the other point I always make. Nobody is better equipped to have those conversations than the people who are around them every single day and have all the data on, how do they work? What do their medicals look like long term?
Yeah.
How do they fit? What's the attitude like? What is all that stuff there? It sounds great for all the rest of us, but all the rest of us are, just kind of throwing around thoughts. Like they really know what's going on. And that's where, yeah, I think there is a chance, that could be the way that plays out.
I like his fit a lot. I just worry there's going to be a little bit of a bidding war because he seems to fit a lot of teams. Good contract, not like it's not crazy. There's a little bit of, depending on the receiving team, the Golden State's a little bit different of a situation than Orlando and stuff like that. And, Milwaukee and all that stuff.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the Nets are doing their very best to say, we don't have to trade him. We'd love to keep him. Like, he's not on an expiring deal, so we're perfectly happy, which is a little bit of offer more. Like that's, when you start that's like one of the key skills you have to have at this time of year is like, let's play translator, right? And I wish there was a Google Translate button to put in NBA trade deadline speak to plain English, because like that's what that really is. That is we need a little bit more like that. That's what that becomes.
The Google Translate is turned into the front office show every day and hear what you have to say, because you Google Translate. It's Keith's it's the front office show translation.
we try.
Do great with it. Well, Keith, I think we say this every time. We went over again. We said we were going to speak for 30 minutes. It's been 40. I really appreciate this. I love these conversations with you. I think they're very insightful, very educational for the listeners, and they're just fun for me to have, because this is kind of where I get nerdy myself and enjoy looking at all the different elements, studying the Magic roster and cap sheet and just all sorts of things. It's a lot of fun. We've said a few times, but go ahead and let the listeners know where they can find you and all that stuff.
Yeah, if you like the stuff we talked about here today, boy, I got a lot of it up on Spot Track already. You can find it there. You can find even more coming over the next week or two. I also do trade breakdowns, very in-depth trade breakdowns every time there's a deal. All the deals that have gone down so far, I've got a breakdown up on all of them, and I try to really examine it more than just this guy can play and this guy can't. Like I really try to get deep into why did they make that trade? What does this mean for them now and going forward and in the future? So that's something, I highly encourage people to go check out. And, for my opinion, take it for what it's worth. I think we have the very best trade machine on the planet that's publicly available. The rules are accurate. The rosters are accurate. The salaries are accurate. If you really want to get out there and see what it looks like, you can go. And it's a little less applicable right now because we're really closing in on the trade deadline, but you can toggle restrictions on and off if you really want to see what it looks like. And yes, for everybody who's asked, after the trade deadline is over, we will work on flipping the trade machine to 25-26. It'll take us a little bit. We got to kind of recover from the aftermath and make sure we get everything updated, but we will flip it after that, because for a whole lot of people, thankfully not the Magic anymore, they immediately turn to the off season and what trades can we make in the summertime and all that, because we stink and our season's over and all that. But we will flip it after the trade deadline passes. And then you mentioned it, which I appreciate you shouting out, NBA front office show every day, Monday through Friday. Trevor Lane and I breaking down all the latest news around the NBA. If there is a major trade, we go live to break down that trade live. If any happen here in the next couple weeks, we'll definitely doing that. Every Friday is a live show where we take questions from the audience and have a lot of fun with that. And special trade deadline will be live throughout leading up to and then through the trade deadline passing at 3:00. Generally go live right around 1:00 in the afternoon or so Eastern. Trade deadline's at 3, and we'll react to everything that happens, hopefully more If it doesn't, we'll talk about why maybe some stuff didn't happen. But I think we're going to get a decent amount of action.
I'm looking forward to it. And I mean, I listen to your guys' show pretty regularly throughout the 12 months of the year, but Magic fans, NBA fans that are listening, if this is the time to tune in.
Yeah.
If you haven't already, this is the time, because they do a great job breaking down everything, dissecting the, Google translating the rumors and what's real, what's not. And then if something happens, you hear about it in a very good and detailed way and super easy to digest. So you guys do a great job over there. Keith, thanks again for joining the show. I really appreciate it. If something massive comes down, I'm calling you. I have your number, so I'll just
for sure.
Keith, let's jump on. After you do the front office breaking show, obviously, I hope I could be second in line. But if not, we'll catch you a little bit later in the year or closer to the off season. Thanks again for joining the show. And Magic fans, that's going to wrap up another episode of the Close Up, and we'll see you next week. Peace.